Somebody once told me the world is gonna roll me. I ain't the sharpest tool in the shed.
This whole page is going to be about that difference and really focusing on simplifying square roots. So the purpose is to simplify numbers written in square root form. When you're done writing the purpose, go ahead and draw a Venn diagram. I think it should take up about half the page. We're going to draw a Venn diagram under the purpose. The first circle is going to represent what I mean when I ask for you to approximate. And the second circle is going to be describing simplify. So here's the definition for approximate. It means close to the actual, but not completely accurate or exact. For instance, the square root of 12. What is a perfect square that is less than 12 or less than the square root of 12? This is why we're having the fluency test, because we'll be doing a lot of work with square roots. It's important for you to know them. What do you think? 9? Absolutely. So the square root of 9. What is the square root of 9? 3. Okay, so we know that the square root of 12 is going to be bigger than 3 and less than 4. What's the square root of, or what is 4 squared? I'm hearing it. It is 16. So the square root of 16 is equal to 4. So we know that it is approximately 3 is the whole number. It's not the 4 because it hasn't quite made it there yet. Okay. And then we're going to have a fraction here. So what is the distance between 9 and 12? 3. So 3 is our numerator. And then the distance between 9 and 16 is 7. So that's our denominator. So the square root of 12 is approximately 3 and 3/7. To find out the fraction, I had to look at the distance between between 3 and 4 using the square root numbers. So what is the distance between 9 and 16? 7. So that's my denominator. 12 is not all the way to the 16. So it's not 7 away from 9. It's only 3 there. We're like 3 away from 9. So that's the numerator. All right, let's look at the definition of simplify. It is to make easier to do or understand. So again, we're going to work with the square root of 12. The square root of 12's value has not changed from when it was over here, but you will see we will get a different answer. So we have the square root of 12, and we're going to practice this more. But the first step is to list all of the factors of 12. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. 5 is not a factor of 12. 5 times what would give me 12?
Oh, okay. Never mind.
Okay.
I get it
Now I'm going to go through and I'm going to circle all of the perfect squares. So that is 1 and 4.
What?
Those are the only perfect squares because the square root of 4 equals 2. That makes it a perfect square. Well, the square root of 2 is not a whole number. The square root of 2 is a decimal. It's irrational. It goes on forever.
Why is it 6?
The square, what times what gets you 6? Some decimal number, right? No. When you're doing the square root, it has to be the same number. We're going to select the highest perfect square, which in this case is 4. And so 4 times 3 is 12. So we have the square root of 12 equals, instead of writing 12, I'm going to write 4 times 3 equals the square root of 4 times 3. 12 is the same thing as 4 times 3. Then I'm going to break it apart at the multiplication sign. So this is the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. Basically, I'm trying to get out that perfect square. What is the square root of 4? 2. So this is the same thing as 2 times the square root of 3. So we started out with 12, the square root of 12 on both of these, right? So this is a different number than the other one, but they're still representing the same value. This is saying 3 plus this fraction, and this is saying 2 times this square root. So you can go home and get a calculator and type these into the calculator. You'll get the same answer, or right about. They'll be pretty close. What is the biggest difference between how these answers look? What does this one, 3 and 3/7, have that the other one doesn't? A fraction. So when you approximate a square root, you're going to have a fraction, or you can have a decimal. If I say fraction, I automatically mean the decimal value most of the time. So what is this one over here on Simplify have? What was that? A square root, absolutely. So if you are simplifying, you're still going to have a square root. So how are they the same? Well, they both give a different representation for the same value. And in this example, that value was the square root of 12. Okay? I've also explained it like, think of the color red. Okay? That word has many different representations. You can say that word or that meaning in French, in Japanese, in Chinese, in Spanish, in English, all different things, or all different languages, but it still represents the same color. Okay? So even though this approximation, it looks totally different from the simplification, it's still, both of them represent the same value of the square root of 12. All right, we're going to work with approximating first. So we're going to approximate the square root of 48. What is a perfect square that is less than the square root of 48? 36, absolutely. So we have the square root of 36. What is the square root of 36? 6. So we know that over here we're going to have 7. What is 7 squared? 49. The square root of 49 is the same value as 7. They're just written in a different form. Okay? So this is going to be approximately 6 wholes because it's not quite to the 7 yet. And then my fraction. How far away is 36 from 48? 12, so that's my numerator. And how far away is 36 from 49? 13, that's my denominator. And that's it. That one's done.
48, the 36 and 49.
Okay, we start with 48. So on our perfect squares list, we're looking for a perfect square that is less than 48. The very first one, less than 48. So like 16 doesn't work because there's a 25. 25 doesn't work because there's 36. But the next one's 49. So you want to find what perfect square is 48 between.
Oh, okay, so like that chart that we did yesterday.
All right, let's look at another one. Let's do the square root of 8. On your perfect squares list, what is a perfect square less than the square root of 8? 4. All right, so we have the square root. I'm having issues with the camera here. The square root of 4. What is the square root of 4? 2. So this must be a 3. What is 3 squared? 9. Okay, so this is approximately 2, and then we need a fraction. So how far is 4 from 8? 4. That's your numerator. How far is 4 from 9? 5. That's your denominator. There you go. Okay, let's look at the square root of 125. On your perfect squares list, what is the next smallest perfect square? 121. So the square root of 121 is what? 11. So this is going to be between 11 and 12. The square, what is 12 squared? 144. Is that what you were looking for? Was the bigger one? Okay. So this is approximately 11. How far away is 121 to 125? 4 away. And how far away is 121 to 144? 23.
So do you always use the one on the left, like the 11? Would you always use that side?
Mm-hmm. Because it's not, if it would have to be bigger than 144 to be 12 in a fraction. Okay, now let's simplify each of these. So we have the square root of 48, and I'm going to list the factors of 48 rather quickly just to help us out on time. But you'll be expected to know how to factor numbers on your own. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 12, 16, 24, and 48. Now I'm going to go in and I am going to circle all of the perfect squares. So that's 1, because 1 times 1 is 1. 4, because 2 times 2 is 4. And 16, because 4 times 4 is 16. And I'm going to pick the largest one, which is 16. And 16 times 3 is 48. So I'm going to rewrite the square root of 48 as the square root of 16 times 3. Because 48 has to be the same thing that's going on here. So 16 times 3 is 48. Then I break this apart and I've got the square root of 16 times the square root of 3. And then I simplify. What is the square root of 16? 4. So this is just 4 times the square root of 3. Yeah, let's try the square root of 8. The factors of 8 are 1, 2, 4, and 8. The perfect squares in that list are 1 and 4. 4 is the largest, so I'm going to use 4 and 2. So we get the square root of 4 times 2. Then we break this apart. The square root of 4 times the square root of 2. What is the square root of 4? 2. So this is 2 square roots of 2, or 2 times the square root of 2. The square root of 125, the factors for 125 are 1, 5, 25, and 125. The perfect squares are 1 and 25. 25 times 5. So this is the square root of 25 times 5. We bust that apart. And we get, what is the square root of 25? 5. So we get 5 times the square root of 5. So that's in your notebook. You also have a wonderful notes page that I want us to fill out real quick, just so you can remember the steps for simplifying radicals. You have to first find all of the blank of the original number, all of the factors. The second step is to choose the factor pair with the blank perfect square. Highest or largest, either one of those will work. You are not dismissed. The third thing is to factor out the perfect square. The fourth thing is to find the root of the perfect square. And then you simplify. Now let's say up here you choose the wrong perfect square. You made a mistake. That's okay. You can repeat these steps as you need to. Okay?